But there is riches in the niches.
The topical will always be relevant on social, but you've got to sort of move fairly quickly with it.
I do think that when someone tells a good story, people listen.
Influencers have been a real key to unlocking that target audience.
Video is super powerful.
Welcome to the Social Media for Business podcast. I'm Rebecca Bridgen, founder of Innovate Social and your host for this episode. And this month's theme that we're doing at Innovate Social is social media knowledge expansion. So basically, what do we need to learn right now to keep up, stay relevant, and get better results from our socials? So today's guest is Carl King. Carl is a digital marketing consultant at Seafarer Social. Many of you might already know him, and also an investor and lead marketing director at Crewin. He combines a passion for maritime tech and communication with deep experience in social media marketing and new business development. And Carl has a standout proof point. He helped secure investment for a maritime SaaS platform and then grew its user base from 5,000 to 75,000, which is quite impressive, by creating engaging content focused on real stories and lived experiences of seafarers. And then he went on to launch Seafarer Social, partnering with maritime organizations to improve crew welfare and retention through impactful campaigns. And at Crewin, he leads marketing to position the brand as a leader in yachting employment, aligning the message with clear values and the right audience. So today we're going to get practical with Carl, and we're going to talk about the tools and technologies that are actually helping marketers with platform changes that have caught people out, what maritime audiences are doing with their attention right now, and which formats are genuinely performing for businesses. So here's a quick question to consider whilst you're listening to the episode. If your competitors learned one new social media skill or tool this quarter and you didn't, what would put you at the biggest disadvantage? So Carl, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca. I'm a huge fan of your work, and you and I have been going backwards and forwards for some time. I love to see the growth that you've developed to Innovate, and it's a huge pleasure to join you today.
And likewise, actually, I've been really enjoying the Seafarer Social and seeing also its development. So we've kind of been on a parallel path, haven't we, for about the same sort of timeline.
Yeah.
So it's a real sort of, when you want to wave the flag for somebody else who sort of started out at the same time you. So let's just deep dive straight into question one. Let's explore that rather tasty stat that you've grown a user base of one of your clients from 5,000 to 75,000 through content, because that is pretty impressive. So I want to really get into the meat of that. What was the one insight that unlocked that, and how did you discover it?
So that was an application which was built to help seafarers find a job on board. The app was kind of like Tinder. So there'd be a bunch of job listings and the seafarer would quite literally swipe left or right. And then there was an AI platform in the background, a dashboard, where we'd partner them up with proposed ship management companies, and the ship management company would pay for credits. And that was essentially the business model. The app is no longer, but at the time, the way we grew that user base was, well, to be completely transparent with you, this was back in 2020, 2021. I was approached by the founders of this company, and they said, we want to get as many seafarers downloaded our app as possible, but we don't know how to do it. And at the time, what had happened is, because of COVID, there was this huge uproar in what we call seafarer influencers, these guys and girls that started creating videos on board vessels. And they got huge engagement because we were all sat at home and watching in awe and in interest as to how these guys were essentially stuck on board vessels in the middle of nowhere for months at a time. And they grew really big user bases off the back of that. But nobody was working with these guys and girls, and I identified them as a really core asset to growing any kind of platform where you want to engage with seafarers. So we started working with seafarer influencers, and we were working with seafarer influencers to start off with, primarily in the Philippines. The first guy I worked with was a guy called Chief McCoy. He had hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. Then we wanted to go for a younger demographic. We started working with a guy called Ivan Guzman. He has 2.4 million followers on TikTok. And there are so many others of these Filipinos who grew these large follower bases, especially on Facebook. 98% of Filipinos use Facebook as a platform. And then we did a lot of that. We did a lot of paid campaigns as well. We did a lot of traditional advertising. We paid for billboards. We put advertisements on jeepneys, which is like the version of a bus in the Philippines. But the real growth we saw from a digital perspective was using the influencers, curating storytelling, and developing a group of ambassadors, as we called them. And they would create videos for us. We created narratives. They would create videos, and then we would direct all that traffic to the app.
That's a fantastic story. So it's very much influencers have been a real key to unlocking that that target audience. So in the last 12 to 18 months, what's changed most on social media that maritime businesses need to clock quite quickly? And what platform changes have caused the most issues for brands recently, like reach drop, links, thought leadership fatigue, DM spam, that sort of thing? And you mentioned, probably cover it a bit later, the Facebook for the Philippines and things like that. So do share your thoughts there.
So my social media and digital marketing lives in two separate bubbles. I call it B2S, business to seafarer platforms that I focus on growing, which is my Facebook and my Instagram. We have around 54,000 followers on Facebook. We have around 11,000 on Instagram. And I have my guys in the Philippines and India who help me grow those channels. Every day we're publishing content specifically targeting seafarers. So it could be memes, it could be reels of life on board, it could be funny stuff, it could be serious stuff. We're covering a lot at the moment around the Strait of Hormuz, but that content that we're creating there is specifically built for seafarers. Then we go to my personal branding stuff, which lives on LinkedIn. And that's really how I'm finding sponsors for my events, how I'm finding consultancy contracts. On LinkedIn, I'm primarily speaking to corporates in the maritime sector. And the way I've seen the most amount of success has been through podcasting. That's been a huge game changer in the last 12 to 18 months. A lot more people are doing it now, and there's some great ones out there. I love yours. I love Christopher Avasano's The Last Dinosaur. He was the OG. He was the first that started. I love Undocked by Rao and Nick Chubb. I think their show is awesome as well. Really valuable insights that they always share. But the Seafarer Social podcast was and still is the first podcast that specifically focuses on talking to crew and talking to people whose decisions affect the lives of crew. So we've really sandboxed ourselves at a small niche. That podcast has been a real game changer for me because podcasting is a win-win situation for everybody. So if I message somebody on LinkedIn and I try to immediately sell to them, I'm going to be put in the same box as everybody else. This is somebody else who's trying to sell me something. But when you say to somebody, when you approach somebody, you say, I don't want anything from you sales-wise. I just want your time. I want you to come on my podcast and let's talk about something that you're passionate about and I'm passionate about. There's way less resistance. So they're more likely to say yes. Everybody loves talking about themselves, or most people do. So having somebody come on and talk about themselves gives them content that they can use for their platforms and their company's platforms. It gives me content, but it also starts a relationship. That person might become a customer of mine later down the line. Once we've filmed the podcast, once we've done the intro calls, once we've met in person, because we've built a relationship. So podcasting is like the pathway of least resistance and a great incentivization to grow your own personal brand because you have content. A great incentivization to grow somebody else's or another company's personal brand. But what people don't talk about is it's actually a great sales channel as well. A great sales channel, indirectly selling.
Yeah. And actually, this was a conversation when I was a guest on your podcast. We had a conversation previously where I was saying, I really wanted to start a podcast. I just was a bit nervous too. And you actually said to me, just do it because it exactly what you just said there. And I have to attest it 100% has helped. But also what I found since starting this podcast is that people have approached me to be on the podcast. So they're aware of the traction that it gets. Even just being a guest on a podcast actually gets that great exposure. So don't be afraid to approach podcasts because, you know, the hosts are often looking for guests all the time, but it's got to be relevant to the podcast. I don't know about you when you get approached. Sometimes I'm like, oh, can I be on your podcast? And I want to talk about X. And it's just completely off the theme of what your whole podcast is. So you're like, yes, but you need to talk about this.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've definitely had that. I mean, I've had opportunities for sponsorship in the past. We've done it once, but it's not necessarily something that I'm massively pushing. I would never charge a guest to come on personally. That's just not for me. I don't see the podcast as a direct route to making revenue off media because the fact of the matter is it's such a niche podcast. You're never going to get Joe Rogan numbers. Okay, we're talking about seafarers to a very small industry, but there is riches in the niches. Creating content for free with a purpose of engagement and growth, it creates indirect selling, and that's where I've seen the most amount of value. It's also opened a lot of doors in terms of public speaking opportunities. You know, I now probably talk at 4 to 5 conferences every year. You know, I'm on the Sea Trade route and they're very, very kind to have me on Crew Connect. And usually I've done CMA in the past and then Singapore and so on and so forth. these are great opportunities again to sort of publish myself as a thought leader, to get my name out there more, and again, indirectly sell. So I think it's a really, really strong, low cost media asset that everybody who has something to say can do and should do, because the more the better. And like I said, it's been a huge game changer for me in the last 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So where do you think maritime attention is sitting right now on social? You were talking about the Strait of Hormuz, obviously within the seafarer element. Are there any other aspects that attention is sitting at the moment?
I think it changes so rapidly because shipping is such a fast moving industry. The fact of the matter is the engagement rate goes drastically higher when bad things happen, which is a shame, but it's just the world that we live in. You know, a ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and it makes BBC. But if a young, 30-year-old guy or woman becomes a master, no one really cares. That's the reality. We give attention to issues over celebrations, and that's the unfortunate part. And right now, we're probably in one of the biggest issues that shipping has faced. 20% of oil, worldwide oil, comes from the Gulf, and no ships can get through right now. Plus, on top of that, all of our petrol prices are going up, which means that interest rates are probably going to go up, which means everything goes up. But where I'm focusing on from Seafarer Social's perspective is how that's affecting seafarers. 7 seafarers have already passed away. 24 ships, 22 to 24 ships have been attacked already, and it's just rising and rising every day. So the story of shipping really focuses on primarily the negative stories. We do try to celebrate those small wins, like when the IMO passed a new policy. For example, this year, the 1st of January, the STCW was updated for seafarers, and there has now been mandatory training around bullying and harassment on board. That's a huge win because we're becoming a more multicultural and diverse workforce on board vessels, and the good shipping companies are trying to create a more homely, safe space for the seafarers that live on board. So having that mandatory training doesn't change everything, but it works towards building a new culture on board. And that was a huge win, I think, and was celebrated online, but it's never going to compare to the same noise when, unfortunately, huge issues are arising.
So basically, topical will always be relevant on social, but you've got to sort of move fairly quickly with it. And unfortunately, you're right, it is human psychology to focus on the negative and obsess over that rather than celebrate the positives. It's a shame, but it is the way the human brain works. So for maritime businesses, in terms of, we've talked about the sort of the content is, topical quite a lot of the time, but what's performing best in terms of format? Is it short vertical video, LinkedIn carousels? What are you finding in your content is getting the most traction?
So I only focus on video. I've actually never really been that good at writing, to be honest. And I learn in a visual and audio manner as well. So for me personally, my LinkedIn feed is primarily focused on creating videos. I couldn't tell you necessarily what performs better between vertical and landscape because I test both. But generally speaking, I probably post more landscape videos than I do vertical. And I do post slightly longer videos as well. I do test the 90-second stuff, but really I'm focusing on that kind of stuff for my B2S channels on Instagram and Facebook. For LinkedIn specifically, I think that you can probably demand a little bit more attention than you can on Facebook and Instagram. And you can probably get away with posting a slightly longer video if you have a punchy caption and a story to that video. But equally at the same time, just today I posted a vertical reel on LinkedIn and it's done pretty good numbers so far. So it really depends. Now with the podcast, we have a full-time editor on board who will trim the podcast, create a full-length version that goes on Spotify and YouTube, which has really good edits. And we're trying to go for sort of that diary CEO style. He'll also create a couple of reels for me and we'll post them on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn and see how they perform. But to answer your question, for me personally, I focus on video. And I'm a big believer in video. And also an extra layer to that would be that the video thing really, I think it was like a 2024, 2025 thing where LinkedIn said, we're going to push video now. And it's sort of become more and more popular over the last sort of 18 to 24 months. When I first started LinkedIn in 2021, 2022, nobody was doing video. It was just all blog posts, long captions, and then we saw the introduction of AI, ChatGPT, super obvious ChatGPT posts with the big dashes, and the weird emojis for every single bullet point. And for me personally, I think I could write a really nice prompt into ChatGPT or Claude and maybe it pops something out. And I do still use them. But to get my point across in a way that is authentic, it's never going to be able to be beaten to what video can do. So I will always go for video content.
I think you're right. I think because we as human beings, we interact with one another and we are actually a herd species. So that being able to see and listen, it's almost that sort of tactile of being next to one another. I think there's greater trust built when you can actually see the people. We post this podcast on Spotify and on YouTube, and the YouTube has much higher traction because although Spotify, you can put, visuals up now, but originally it was just the audio on Spotify. So the traction for YouTube was just far greater. And yes, of course, you have to acknowledge that the platform has got a lot more followers and general usability every day. But I think the preference is actually because we want to see the people talking. I mean, I'm going to make this statistic up right now, so please don't quote me on it, but it was like 90% of communication is body language or something like that, isn't it? It's not really about the words per se. So actually, I think that's probably why the preference is to watch the conversation, because you're seeing how people are interacting and actually what they're really saying behind the words, maybe.
100%. I mean, when I take a flight, I would typically download a podcast on Spotify. I personally use Spotify, and on the reverse side of what you said, most of my engagement in terms of long format listening has come from Spotify. Yeah, YouTube, we do post on YouTube, but most of our engagement is through Spotify. And yeah, when I download a podcast and I watch it, watch it on the plane. I'm not listening to it with my eyes closed. I literally have it in landscape and I'm watching it, because you're right. Watching characters talk, you feel like you're connected to them more. You're part of the conversation a lot more. You're in the room, exactly. So I think video is super powerful. Super powerful. And an extra layer as well is, in fact, I just posted something about it today with one of my podcast guests, a guy called Gerardo Borromeo, who's the CEO of Philippines Transmarine Carriers, one of the largest ship management companies in the Philippines. The maritime industry has been an invisible industry for many, many years, and that's because it's never needed to not be. But we are now coming to a world where digitalization is more evident than ever before and growing rapidly. And we're also struggling to find people, young people, who are interested in entering the industry. And the only way to really engage with young people nowadays, if you want to create a recruitment talent, and this isn't just about seafarers anymore, this is about shore-based jobs as well in maritime companies. If you want to create a funnel for talent, you need to make sure that people know who you are and can find you and are excited to work for you. And the only way to do that is by meeting them where they're at. And it's not at career fairs, it's on your social media channels. That's the reality nowadays. Young people have way shorter attention spans, but if you can create content that catches their attention and you're relevant to their interests and needs, they're going to engage with you, they're going to follow you, they're going to stay on top. And once you build like a little digital group of businesses and people that you're really invested in, you really invest in them. Like the people I listen to, like Rao, for example, and Nick Chubb Undocked, I'm listening to it every week because I genuinely like these people, I respect these people, and I'm interested in what they have to say. They have a follower in me. So if you can gain that digitally, you have an asset for life.
Yeah, you've got the whole advocacy. Absolutely. I love Nick and Rahl as well. I tune in here and there. Well, I've known them for many years, but I've been watching Nick since I think he first emerged in the industry. And I thought, I'm going to watch that because he's very intuitive and able to articulate himself very well, and he's very switched on, and I do enjoy. And Rahl obviously is incredibly clever and creative, and the two of them together make a great dynamic. So I agree, and I think when you get something like that and you're able to capture it, because not everybody's able to do podcasting, right? And I've discovered that over the journey, and I think when you get the right dynamic, then it really takes off. But you just touched on something that was actually going to be my next question, was this whole generational thing. What should maritime brands be doing? Yes, okay, we should be tapping into this new generation that's coming through, but what should be the shift that they need to observe in able to make contact? You were talking about obviously going on the right channels and getting them where their attention span is, but that's not enough, right? So what should they be doing to be able to get their attention when they're on that platform?
It's a good question. I think that it's a combination of storytelling. I believe in storytelling massively, and I think that generally speaking, although we live in a world where, again, attention spans are much shorter, I do think that when someone tells a good story, people listen. For example, how many times have you watched a Netflix movie and you've switched it off in the first 10 minutes because it's just too slow? But then there are other times where, like, I watched a movie not long ago called Marty Supreme, and it was about 3.5 hours long, right? Well, it's about 3 hours, not 3.5, but I committed to the whole movie because in the first 10 minutes I was really engaged with it. I was also incredibly engaged by the previous marketing they did before the movie came out because of that investment from the previous marketing they did digitally. And then by having a good hook to begin with when the movie started, I was prepared to invest the 3 hours. And that's what I think it comes down to. It's about marinating. And then when you deliver the message, making sure you have a good story. Yeah, that's how I think, generally speaking, we next generation, so, which is me, I'm 29 years old. I think, generally speaking, my age and younger, that's how you kind of engage with that user base.
Yeah, everybody loves a good yarn, don't they? If it's told well and it's about something interesting, then you're going to be hooked, aren't you? We had a great conversation yesterday about tools. So I really am keen to get into this because this is an area that I get quite excited about, and what you were sharing with me yesterday was pretty tasty. So what technologies are genuinely helping marketers right now, and what's in your toolkit, and what's overrated actually?
The buzzword AI, this is one that I'm sure every single person has talked about, mentioned to you. It's all over LinkedIn. But the thing is for a very long period of time, AI existed in my brain as ChatGPT and language models. That's what AI meant to me. So when people were talking about how they could use AI to build better workflows and better software and systems and coding and all this sort of stuff, it kind of just went over my head because I didn't quite understand exactly what that meant. I'm not a developer, but I took some time out over Christmas and the beginning of this year to really study AI, and not this AGI complex stuff that you mentioned the other day that these experts from Google are talking about, but the surface level stuff that I can access. For example, I was just using ChatGPT before. Now I'm using Claude. Now I'm using Gemini. Now I'm using DeepSeek. Now I'm using ChatGPT as well, right? So I'm playing around with these different language models and I'm learning that some of them can deliver better results for specific problems. So if I need something which is based on statistics and analysis, I use DeepSeek. If I need something which is a little bit more creative, I'll use Claude. An extra layer to that, something that really excites me in terms of tools, is AI agents. And again, this is something that I would hear people talk about, but would not understand exactly how it was executed. So when you use ChatGPT, every conversation that you have is saved on the cloud, right? So the idea of although I could say to ChatGPT, I messaged you 5 months ago about this particular subject, or I could find the chat and I was like, I want to continue talking about this with you. And it would be able to recite that because it would be saved on the cloud. What I'm now playing around with is something called OpenClaw. And that is, instead of having your AI saved to the cloud, it's actually saved to your computer. So you can buy a MacBook or a Mac Mini, and you can download OpenClaw, and you can connect your OpenClaw to all of the language models. So DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Gemini. You can give it access to the internet. You have to pay for these things, but you can give it access to the internet, and it can store all of its memory on your computer. It can read all of your files, and it can essentially become a virtual employee that works 24 hours, 7 days a week. So, I can text my AI bot before I go to bed and say, when I wake up, I want you to create for me a dashboard that publishes all of my views from my YouTube videos, my Spotify videos, what performed best, what the best hooks were. I'm going to wake up at 8 o'clock. I want it done by that point. Yes, sir, no problem. Okay, I fall asleep, wake up. How you getting on? This is all done through WhatsApp. How you getting on? And it spits out to me exactly what I asked for. This, for me, is the most powerful tool out there. It's relatively new. It's only been out really for the last 6 weeks. At least it was published only over the last 6 to 8 weeks. But I think these AI agents, I think, is the next big thing. I think the way people use ChatGPT now as a language model, they just ask it and search things, is how people are going to be using AI agents in the next 12 to 24 months. It's massive.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, okay.
It's scary. It's
It is
scary as
scary.
well
Yeah, yeah.
because it makes you think, oh yeah, well if you're going to use an AI agent, you're not going to have to employ people and stuff. The reality is, I'm a big believer that you will always, but the humans that are using AI and AI agents, and there, by the way, there are some things that it is good for and some things that it is not good for, right? So research, for example, it is unbelievable at. So what's the point in me spending 4 hours researching a guest, right? If my AI agent can search the whole internet and create for me a report, a nicely written 2-page PDF report that I can read and know every single person about the guy or girl I'm about to talk to. Why would you not use it for that? Now, is it really good at creating human written social media posts? Probably not. So a human right now is probably best for that job, but it can certainly assist in creating that workflow and making it quicker and better.
I love that. So, talking about the creative aspect, what's the coolest creative thing you've seen a maritime creator or brand do recently that made you stop scrolling? And why do you think it made you stop scrolling?
There was one that I really liked that Merce done. It was a few years ago, but it still stands out to me, I think, as one of the coolest campaigns. So it was during Pride Month, and I thought this was a really cool concept. And there's a seafarer friend of mine called Captain Thomas Lindegaard Madsen, who is a part of the board of directors at Maersk and also a captain. He's been really supporting LGBTQ seafarers because, to be honest with you, there's not much support system out there for them. What Maersk done is we see Maersk cargo on lorries as we're on the motorway. We see them if we're at the beach and going past. They had this one rainbow container that went around the whole world. And the concept of it from the branding team at Maersk was that when people see it, it would make them think. It was an empty container. People could go inside and write messages about what pride means to them and so on and so forth. And, I'm not somebody who is from that community. Genuinely speaking, I thought the act of creativity in doing something like that was genius because for every single person would see that. It stands out because it's not the typical Maersk container that you would see. It makes you think. And I just thought from a brand perspective, it was absolute genius.
And also it's playing on the whole connected earth thing, because if that's going around the earth and you're allowing people to write messages, then actually it's connecting lots of people from that community of supportive messages across the world. And how rather wonderful. And then also from a social media perspective, I'm pretty sure it would be, have you seen it? Take a picture, tag it. And I bet that was going on as well. Genius. Yeah.
Absolute genius.
Well done, Merce. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round and you can pick 2 questions out of it. One social habit you stop that nobody misses, a leading indicator that predicts results 4 to 6 weeks later, your favorite unsexy skill most marketers avoid but should learn, or one trend you think Maritime will adopt next.
So one trend that I don't miss. So I don't know if you've ever dabbled into paid advertising, PPC, so paying social media platforms to run an advert. This was one of the first things that I kind of studied when I entered digital marketing, and it was on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It was one of the best tools to get conversions. There was less people doing it. There was less noise. Nowadays, it's such an aggressive form of advertising. I mean, if you open up YouTube nowadays or Instagram, you're constantly, unless you're paying for the premiums, you're constantly being advertised to. So even if a good product pops up, I'm swiping past because I can't be asked to watch it, right? So I would say one thing, and I still do use it in my digital marketing strategies, but one thing I don't miss is spending tons of money. And by the way, it's more expensive now as well. Way more expensive because they're so incentivized to get you to spend as much money on these platforms. So that would be one thing that I personally don't miss doing. And I prefer organic way more. Can you take me through the others, please? Sorry, I've totally forgot what they were.
I would totally love you to answer your favorite unsexy skill most marketers avoid but should learn.
I would say utilizing AI properly, not just copying and pasting a ChatGPT response and then directly putting it on LinkedIn as a post. Because by the way, it's incredibly obvious, and we've all done it before. Don't get me wrong. There's been times where I've just copied, pasted, posted it. I can't be asked. I'm in a rush, right? But the reality is, every single person who's in communications will immediately be able to pick up that you've used. Yeah, and I've had I've had clients and I've had friends message me saying, please stop using AI. I'm like, sometimes I just want to get it out. I don't want to have to use my brain capacity. I know it sounds terrible to say, but yeah, that's probably what I would say is one unsexy tool that, yeah, I think people should probably get better at.
I love it. Well, that's our conversation. Thank you, Carl King. If you're listening as a maritime marketer or business owner, here's your simple takeaway from today's knowledge expansion theme. And it would be influencers are a great way to expand your audience. 100% start embracing AI and exploring what it can do for you. Podcasts are a brilliant way of exploring new pipelines and really getting to know people and have those conversations. And that's definitely been my takeaway. And of course, topical on social media is always key. So always stay ahead of the game on what's going on and don't be afraid to talk about it. So you can find the Social Media for Business podcast on Spotify and YouTube, as we mentioned earlier. And you can also listen via our website. If this episode helped, do follow the show and share it with someone in the maritime industry who's trying to turn social into real business outcomes. And of course, you can link in with Carl King and follow the Seafarer Social and watch his podcast too, because they are really, really helpful specifically for seafarers. So please do follow along with Carl as well. And of course, if you have any topics that you're curious about that is relating to social media marketing, please do get in touch and we'll try and include your questions in one of our episodes, or better yet, if you think you're going to be a great guest, also get in touch and let us know. So until then, thanks so much, Carl, and bye for now.
Thanks, Rebecca.